The first thing he felt was cold metal beneath his back. Then came the pain, a dull, deep ache in his legs and ribs, and then something soft touched his chest. Corporal Jason Reed opened his eyes slowly. His vision was blurry, but he saw pale blue lights above him. The ceiling looked smooth, curved, not like any Earth hospital. His body felt heavy, like he had been drugged. He tried to move his fingers, they worked. Then his arms. But when he moved his head to the side, what he saw made his heart skip a beat. An alien woman stood beside him. She had lavender skin, bright teal eyes, and long white hair tied neatly. She wore a slim uniform with glowing medical symbols on her chest. But what truly caught his attention was the gentle, almost childlike look of curiosity in her eyes. The alien nurse was touching him. Her warm hand rested on his bare chest, just above his heart. She looked surprised. No, shocked, Jason tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Where am I? He croaked. The alien nurse jerked her hand back, startled. You are awake? She asked in broken English, blinking fast. Her voice was soft, almost musical. He blinked again, trying to sit up. Pain shot through his ribs. Ah, damn. What happened? You were found injured. On battlefield, she replied nervously. We brought you here. Medbay. Orbiting Station 9. He frowned, slowly realizing the truth. He had been injured in a skirmish against the Cretans, but this wasn't a human ship. This was alien. But they saved him? The nurse leaned forward again, scanning his chest with a glowing device. But as she moved the scanner down just slightly lower than his stomach, she stopped, her eyes widened, and her skin shimmered with faint spots of color, like she was blushing. Jason followed her gaze and suddenly realized he had no clothes under the sheet, and the sheet had moved just slightly. Her lips parted in shock. Something is wrong, she whispered, staring, frozen. Jason felt his own cheeks burn. He quickly pulled the blanket up, confused and embarrassed. What's wrong? He asked, sitting up slightly despite the pain. I touched your body just above here. She pointed to his lower abdomen. And it reacted. Rapidly, she added, stepping back as if he had a weapon. Jason looked at her like she was joking. Then it hit him, she didn't understand human biology. Oh no, he thought. She must have accidentally triggered a biological reaction. A very male reaction. The nurse whispered something in her own language and tapped her cum device. Red lights blinked above the door. Jason could hear other footsteps rushing closer. Wait. This isn't an emergency, he said quickly, holding up his hand. But it was too late. 2 more alien nurses entered. Both of them looked at the scanner. Then at him. Then at that area, they gasped. One dropped her tablet. It's spreading. One of them cried, panicking. No signs of fever, no rash, but the tissue is swelling unusually, said the other. Taking notes, Jason covered his face with both hands. This was not how he imagined first contact with another species, especially while half naked on an alien medical table. It's not dangerous, he said awkwardly. It's just a reaction. It's normal for humans. The alien nurse who first touched him leaned in closer again, still looking confused and slightly curious. Normal, but it grew so fast. When I touched you, she whispered, almost to herself. Does it hurt? Jason groaned. No, it doesn't hurt. It's just embarrassing. The nurse tilted her head. Embarrassing means shame? Yes, he said, frustrated. Please, just can I have clothes? The nurses looked at each other, then nodded. One brought a soft cloth-like garment and handed it to him. He quickly put it on under the sheet, breathing a sigh of relief. But he noticed something strange. The first nurse, the one who touched him, was still staring, not with fear now, but fascination, like she wanted to understand what had happened, or maybe what would happen if she touched him again. As the other nurses left the room, she stayed behind. She stepped close and said softly, "My name is Liari." Jason looked at her, still red-faced. "I'm Jason," he replied. Liari gently placed her fingers on his arm. I want to learn more. About humans, she said, her voice low. But maybe we begin with a safer part. Jason chuckled weakly. That would be smart. Outside the medbay, one of the senior doctors watched the entire interaction through a small glass window. His expression unreadable, he tapped his tablet and sent a message. Subject has awakened. Reactions confirmed. Monitor interaction between Nurse Liari and human 024. To be continued. Asterisk Nurse Liari stood frozen at the foot of the bed. Her eyes stayed locked on the strange bulge rising beneath the human male's thin gown. Her hands trembled. She had never seen anything like this. Not in her medical training, not even in Alien. Biology lectures, she stepped back slowly, eyes wide. Internal swelling, visible from the outside, reacting to my touch. She whispered in disbelief. Jason, still half sitting on the bed, tried to calm her. It's not dangerous, he said, trying to sound relaxed, but Liari wasn't listening. She tapped her wrist communicator with urgency. Code Violet Biological. Emergency, she whispered in her native tongue. Unknown reaction triggered by contact. Requesting backup in Medbay 3, the alert blinked red. And within moments, the doors slid open. 2 more nurses and a senior medic rushed in. They stopped as soon as they saw what Liari was pointing at. The lower body of the human soldier. The sheet barely hiding the growth. The senior medic stepped forward, holding a scanning rod. No injuries? No signs of internal bleeding? She asked quickly. Liari shook her head, still pale. I touched him gently, just under the navel. And it started to grow rapidly. Jason covered his face with his hand again. Oh God. It's not what you think, he muttered. The medic leaned down with the scanner. Jason flinched. Please don't scan that directly, he said quickly, his voice rising. The scanner hovered, beeped once, then went silent. No fever. No inflammation markers. No venom, no tissue tear. The medic read out loud. Just extreme blood flow localized in one area. Jason coughed awkwardly. It's natural. It happens when a human male gets stimulated. The room went silent. The aliens blinked at him. Stimulated? One nurse asked, confused. Liari's cheeks turned lavender again, her version of a blush. I was taking his heartbeat. My fingers may have moved too low, she admitted. I didn't mean to cause whatever that is. Jason groaned again and looked away. Trust me. It's not your fault. It's just how male humans respond sometimes. The senior medic looked at her team. Note, possible species-specific arousal reflex, she said while logging the data, triggered by physical contact or proximity. Needs further testing. Jason raised an eyebrow. Testing? No, I don't think that's necessary, he said quickly, pulling the blanket higher. But Liari looked deep in thought. Her eyes weren't afraid anymore. Now they were curious. Even fascinated. I didn't mean to harm him, she said, placing a hand gently over her heart. I only meant to help, Jason nodded, calming down a little. I know. You saved me. Thank you. But the senior medic didn't look so relaxed. She turned to Liari and whispered something in their language. Liari's face changed. She looked shocked and a little hurt. Jason watched them with narrowed eyes. What's going on? He asked. The senior medic turned back to him. For now, Nurse Liari is being reassigned until we understand the full effect of your anatomy, she said. Jason frowned. What? No, that's not fair. She didn't do anything wrong. Liari looked at him, her lips parting slightly. She is right. I crossed boundaries. I must step away, she said softly. Before Jason could say anything more, she gave him one last look. A strange mix of apology and longing. Then she turned and left. Jason stared at the ceiling. Great, he thought. First contact with aliens. And now they think I'm some kind of swollen freak. But unknown to him, Liari hadn't gone far. Just outside the medbay, She leaned against the wall, her heart still beating fast. Her fingers still tingled from the moment she touched him. Something deep inside her had awakened, something ancient and unfamiliar. She opened a private file on her wristpad and whispered, "Begin personal log." Subject, Human024. She looked down at her hand and whispered, "I want to know why my body reacted to." Inside the room, Jason had no idea that for Liari, this was no longer a case study. This was personal, and the mystery had only just begun, to be continued. Jason sat alone in the quiet medbay. Only the soft hum of alien machines surrounded him. He wore a loose medical robe now, but he still felt awkward. No human wanted their first impression on another species to be that. He stared at the ceiling, trying to clear his mind. She looked scared, but also curious. He murmured. Outside the room, behind a tinted glass panel, several alien doctors and analysts watched him carefully. Charts floated in the air around them, glowing with bio readings. The senior medic tapped her screen. There was no virus, no injury, no threat. But the reaction was real, she said. Another scientist leaned closer. Reaction to what? That's the question. We've treated hundreds of alien species, the medic added. None had that kind of response. Then a younger tech nervously raised her voice. What if it wasn't a medical issue, but a mating signal? The room fell silent. Meanwhile, Liari sat alone in a small research chamber. She replayed the footage from her wrist recorder, her fingers brushing the human skin. The sudden rush of blood, his soft groan, the look in his eyes. She pressed pause. Her hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from something else. What did I do to him? She whispered. And why did I feel warm when I touched him? She opened her species medical database, searching for something, anything about humans. But the information was limited. Primitive war species, strong, short lifespans. Emotionally unstable, the summary read, but it said nothing about this strange bonding behavior. Liari leaned back and closed her eyes. She remembered how her skin heated, how her heart fluttered. It wasn't like fear, it was like instinct. An instinct she didn't even know her species had. She opened her private log and typed, Subject Human024. Touch caused vasodilation and enlargement of external organ. Possibly a natural defense or reproductive reaction. Unexpectedly, my own vitals increased. Further study required. But before she could continue, her wristpad pinned. Return to Medbay 3. Immediate observation ordered. Her eyes widened. She stood and walked quickly down the corridor. She didn't know whether to be nervous or excited. Back in Medbay 3, Jason noticed the door slide open again, and there she was, Liari, walking back in. Her face calm, but her fingers clutched her pad tightly. You again? Jason asked, raising an eyebrow. I thought they benched you. I asked to return. She said softly, for observation. Strictly professional, Jason chuckled. Sure, professional. She moved closer and stood by his bed. I want to scan the affected area, she said, her cheeks already flushing purple. Fully clothed, no contact. Just a scan, Jason sighed and nodded. All right. Let's get it over with. She held the scanner carefully, trying not to tremble. The machine buzzed, lights blinking. Liari studied the data as it appeared, increased blood flow. Again, she said. Even without touch. Jason looked away, embarrassed. It's your voice, he muttered. It's kind of soft, comforting. My body just reacts. Liari blinked. My voice causes this reaction? He shrugged. It's not your fault. Just a human thing, I guess. She turned and looked at the monitor again. But something else appeared this time. A second reading. Her own heart rate. Elevated. Respiration. High. Skin temperature. Rising. What? She whispered. She hadn't noticed the second scanner was pointed at her. Her body was reacting too. Jason noticed her expression. You okay? He asked. She hesitated. No, I mean yes. I don't know. Liari sat on the edge of his bed, still holding the pad in her hands. Jason, she said softly. Maybe this wasn't just your biology reacting. Jason raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She turned to him and held his gaze. I felt something too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When I touched you, something awakened inside me. Jason's smile faded. That makes two of us, he said slowly. They sat in silence, staring at each other, not as patient and nurse anymore, but as two living beings who had accidentally crossed a line neither of them fully understood. And outside the room, the senior medic watched the silent footage with a cold expression. She tapped a message into her tablet. Begin species compatibility analysis. Prepare. Isolation chamber. The nurse is compromised. Liari stood outside the medbay's airlock, her hands shaking slightly. Not from fear this time, but anticipation. She had reviewed the human scans again and again. No toxins, no parasites, no abnormal cells, and yet his body reacted as if something powerful had been activated. Because of her, she looked down at her own fingers, the same ones that had touched him. Her skin still held a faint heat, almost like electricity buzzing just under the surface. It made no logical sense, but something inside her, something ancient and instinctive, was urging her to return. The door opened with a soft whoosh. Jason sat upright now, sipping strange blue water through a straw. He looked better, but when he saw Liari walk in again, he nearly choked. You're back? He asked, wiping his mouth. I thought your people were gonna lock me in some alien zoo. Liari smiled gently, her voice calm. I convinced them to give me one last interaction. Purely medical. Jason tilted his head, amused. Purely medical sounds like trouble. She stepped closer, not laughing. I want to run a controlled experiment, she said quietly. I need to confirm if it was touch or just my presence that caused your reaction. Jason blinked. You want to test it on purpose? Yes, she said seriously. But only with your permission. Jason hesitated. He was a soldier, trained for battle, not this. Still, part of him was curious too, maybe even excited. All right, he said slowly. Go ahead, Doc. Liari took a slow breath and gently reached forward. Her fingers hovered just above his arm, not touching yet. She looked into his eyes. Ready? He nodded. Her fingertips touched his skin, softly, just a brush. Nothing happened at first, but within seconds, Jason felt a familiar warmth rise through his body. Blood rushed downward again. His breath hitched, and her scanner beeped wildly, initiating. Blood vessel dilation, she whispered. Identical to last incident. She touched a different spot, his shoulder. The reaction stayed, but didn't intensify. Then she slid her hand down to his forearm. Her skin pressing against his, Jason inhaled sharply. Okay, that definitely does something, he said through clenched teeth. But what shocked Liari more was her own body's response. Her chest rose faster, her cheeks flushed violet. Again, and a strange hum echoed inside her ears like her own blood was responding to his. She quickly pulled her hand back, both of them breathing heavily now. I felt it again, she whispered. This isn't just physical, Jason. Our bodies are sinking. Jason wiped his forehead. I've never felt anything like that with any human girl, he admitted. I don't even know what this is. Liari stepped back, trying to calm her heartbeat. She tapped the scanner's results. Subject 024. Elevated response to direct contact with Nurse Liari. Secondary subject. Liari. Matching biological resonance. Emotional stimulation noted. Conclusion. Unidentified interspecies attraction or bonding mechanism. Jason stood slowly, using the bedrail for balance. Are we some kind of weird match? Liari looked up at him, eyes soft. In our culture, bonding happens when energy frequencies align. But that takes years to form. Jason raised a brow. And we're matching after 2 days? She nodded slowly. It shouldn't be possible. Just then, the medbay lights dimmed. and a loud chime echoed. A warning message flashed across the top wall. Subject 024 and medical staff Liari must report to isolation. Quarantine order from Bioethics Board. Jason cursed under his breath. They're locking us up? Liari looked at him, fear finally returning to her eyes. No, she said quietly. They're afraid of what we've started. The doors opened behind them. 2 armored guards waited. Jason stepped in front of Liari without thinking. If they try to hurt her, they'll have to go through me, he growled. Liari touched his arm. It's all right. I'll go, she said softly. But Jason, I don't think this was an accident. He turned to her, confused. What do you mean? Her voice was a whisper only he could hear. I think something, or someone, wanted us to meet, to be continued. Inside the cold, glowing quarantine chamber, silence filled the air. Jason sat on the metal bench, arms crossed, still dressed in his loose patient robe. Across from him stood Liari, stiff, quiet, eyes unreadable. They were alone, sealed behind layers of alien glass and force fields. No nurses, no guards. Just them and the blinking monitors on the wall. Jason finally spoke, breaking the silence. So, this is what alien jail looks like. Liari didn't laugh. She stood near the scanner, watching her own medical chart scroll up. The numbers were rising again, her pulse, her skin temp, her hormone levels. Something is wrong with me now, she said quietly. My body is changing. Jason stood up, confused. You mean from touching me? Liari nodded slowly, turning her glowing eyes toward him. I thought your biology was the only one reacting, but I was wrong. Jason walked over carefully. He looked at her vitals, now mirrored on the screen behind her. Her body showed signs of arousal, emotional stimulation, even minor pheromone shifts, like she was entering some alien version of heat. You think it's my fault? Jason asked, feeling a little guilty. Liari looked down at her hands. No, she said, almost in a whisper. My species isn't supposed to bond this way. Not without ceremony, not without years of contact. She paused, then added, but you touched me once, and something inside me responded. Jason stepped closer. Well, you're not alone, he said gently. My heart races when you're near. I don't know what it means, but it's real. They stood close now. The air between them warmer, heavier. Liari blinked slowly, her breath shallow. My fingertips still tingle, she whispered. From when I touched your chest, Jason. Looked down at her hands. Then maybe we test something again, he said, his voice low. Let's both touch something together. She hesitated, but slowly raised her hand. Jason raised his too, and their palms met in the space between them. No sparks, no lights. But both of them gasped quietly. Her hand buzzed with soft heat. Jason felt his spine tingle, and above them, the scanner let out a soft chime. Biological resonance increased by 42%. They stared at the screen, then back at each other. Liari's lips parted, and she took a small step closer. It's not just attraction, she said softly. It's synchronization. Jason tilted his head. You mean like we're syncing? Like machines? She shook her head gently. No. Like mates. Before he could respond, an alert flashed red behind them. Emergency override. Biohazard in quarantine. 3 of chambers shook. A warning siren howled, and gas began to hiss from the ceiling. Liari's eyes widened. They're trying to suppress the hormones, flooding the room with blockers. Jason covered his nose. They think we're contaminated? Liari grabbed his wrist. No, Jason, they're not trying to stop you. They're trying to stop me. He looked at her, alarmed. What do you mean? Her voice shook. I read ancient medical texts last night. There's a hidden gene in some of our kind. A forgotten trait. She leaned closer, her face full of fear and wonder. It only activates in the presence of a compatible mate. Of another species. Jason felt a chill. And that's me? Her voice was barely a breath. Yes. Jason pulled off the emergency filter mask on the wall and placed it over her mouth. "Then we're getting out of here," he said. "I won't let them erase something we didn't even choose." Liari held the mask, eyes wide with emotion. "But how?" "The doors are locked sealed." Jason's eyes glanced toward the scanner, still active, still sensed to them both. He walked over, placed both his hands on the glass. "Then let's overload the sink," he said, "if we're triggering something they don't understand. Let's give them something they can't control." Behind him, Liari watched the human she once thought fragile now take charge. Powerful, defiant, brave. Her body shivered again. But this time, not from fear. And as Jason activated the panel, their joined energy spiked once more, enough to make the chamber tremble. Asterisk, the alarms stopped as suddenly as they started. The gas vents sealed shut. The red lights faded to pale blue. But something had changed. Jason and Liari stood together in the center of the sealed chamber, still breathing, still alive. And now, still connected, outside, the control room had gone silent. The bioethics officers stared at their screens. Stunned, 2 species. 1 link. And the monitors proved it was no accident. "Vitals are syncing in real time," one whispered. "They're breathing in the same rhythm." Another tapped the scanner screen, eyes wide. "And her gene markers just shifted again. She's transforming." The chief medical overseer stood behind them with clenched fists. "This cannot be leaked to the council," she said sharply. "If they find out what the human triggered, they'll demand breeding trials." "But what if it's natural?" One doctor asked. "What if we've misunderstood humans? And ourselves?" The overseer turned with fire in her voice. "No alien has ever bonded with a human before. This is chaos uncontrolled, unpredictable." She paused and narrowed her eyes. "Erase the records. Seal the room. Quarantine them until further orders, inside the chamber." Jason wiped sweat from his brow. His body buzzed with energy like his blood itself was humming. Liari's cheeks were glowing faint purple now, her hair shimmering with faint light. "What did we just do?" Jason asked, catching his breath. Liari looked down at her palm, the place where they had touched. She whispered, "Our resonance grew too strong. We may have triggered an old connection our species forgot." Jason chuckled weakly. "Great, you touch a human and awaken forbiddance. Alien biology. I must be lucky." But Liari didn't smile. She looked worried now, even scared. "Jason," she said quietly, "they won't let this go. They'll try to separate us. Or worse." Jason's jaw tightened. "Not happening. If they come for you, they'll have to get through me." Just then, the wall panel blinked. A soft light flashed above the door. It wasn't a warning. It was a silent surveillance override. "They're watching us," Liari said, her voice barely a whisper. "And they've muted the logs." Jason leaned close. "They're trying to cover this up." She nodded. "They want to keep the bond a secret. If this gets out, it could change everything." Jason thought fast. "Then we leak it first." Liari blinked. "What?" He pointed to her wristpad. "You recorded everything, right? The scans, the reaction, the syncing?" She nodded, slowly, understanding his plan. "If we send this to the central data grid, everyone will see." Jason smiled. "Exactly. The truth can't be hidden forever." But before she could upload, the chamber door unlocked. Click. 2 security officers entered, tall and armored. The lead one stepped forward. "You are to be relocated," he said coldly. "Do not resist." Jason stepped in front of Liari again. "Where are you taking us?" The officer didn't answer. Instead, he raised a metal cuff device. Glowing blue. "Restraints are required." Liari stepped beside Jason, lifting her chin. "No," she said firmly. "We are bonded now. You cannot undo that with force." The officers hesitated, confused, unsure how to handle this. And that was all Jason needed. He moved fast, grabbing the guard's wrist, spinning him around. The other officer stepped back in shock. "Do not harm him," Liari cried. But Jason already had the first one on the floor, cuff device in his hand. The chamber lights flashed red again. Unauthorized resistance detected, a robotic voice said. Jason handed the cuff device to Liari. Scan into the cuff device. Jason handed the cuff device to Liari. Grid. Send everything now. She opened her private log, trembling but determined. Uploading file. Bonding sequence 024 transfer complete. Shared to Medical AI Archive, Central Research Channel, Civilian Cloud Feed. The signal burst through the network. Within minutes, hundreds of terminals lit up with the data. Doctors, researchers, even students across space began to see it. Human and an alien syncing on a level never seen before. A nurse and a soldier, bound by biology and something deeper. Elsewhere. An old alien scholar opened the file on a dusty archive world. His 4 glowing eyes widened as he whispered to himself, "It has returned." The ancient link. He stood and walked toward a dark chamber of sealed scrolls. If this is true, the prophecy has already begun. Back in the chamber, Jason and Liari stood hand in hand as more guards surrounded the medbay. But this time, they weren't afraid, because now the universe knew, and nothing would be the same again. The stars outside the station shimmered in silent witness. Inside the biomedical chamber, Jason and Liari stood surrounded, not by weapons, but by watchers. The entire facility had changed. No longer was it a quiet medbay with secret orders. Now it was the center of galactic attention. The leaked footage had spread across 12 systems in less than an hour. News networks, research labs, political councils. Everyone was talking about the human and the alien nurse who had sensed. Some called it love, others called it a threat, but no one could deny. It was real. Liari stood beside Jason, her hand still gripping his. Her body was no longer trembling. The heat under her skin had settled into something calm, something steady. A strange peace flowed between them, like their nervous systems had become one. Jason looked around at the scientists who now studied him, not as a test subject, but as a phenomena. "Funny," he muttered. "I came here in pieces, and somehow I leave complete." Liari smiled faintly. "You're not leaving alone," she said softly. "Our bond is recognized by my biology." "That means I'm yours now," Jason blinked. "Wait, like, permanently?" She nodded once. "Unless your people have a word for breaking such things." Jason laughed under his breath. "We do. It's called heartbreak." She tilted her head. "I won't let that happen." Suddenly the doors hissed open, and a new figure entered. An elder, robed in white and silver, 4 arms, ancient markings on her skin, and a staff that glowed like the stars. All the scientists bowed immediately. Jason whispered, "Who's that?" Liari's eyes widened. "That's the Grand Bioseer. She oversees all interspecies genetics." The elder stepped forward and spoke in a calm, deep voice. "I have seen the bond with my own eyes. I have reviewed your link, your vitals, and your reactions." She paused and looked directly at Jason. "You are not a mutation. You are the missing variable." Jason blinked. "Missing from what?" The Bioseer turned to the others in the room. 1,000 cycles ago, our ancestors recorded a prophecy that one day a foreign heart would awaken a dormant seed in our blood. She looked at Liari now. "You child, carry that seed." "And now it has bloomed," Liari whispered. "Then this was never a mistake." The Bioseer raised her hand. "No, it was destiny." She stepped forward and placed her staff between them. "By our laws, your bond is sacred. You may stay together, or return to Earth as one." Jason looked at Liari. Her violet eyes shimmered, soft and glowing. "If I leave," he asked, "would you come with me?" She nodded. "If I stay, would you remain with me?" He smiled. "I guess we're both stuck now." The crowd around them laughed gently. Tension turned to warmth. And the once sterile chamber now felt like a place of life, of hope. Jason leaned close. "I never thought a nurse could change my life." Liari leaned closer too. I never thought a patient could awaken mine. They touched foreheads, a human gesture, but she understood it now. Their bodies didn't burn with confusion anymore. Now they pulsed with something deeper, trust, warmth, and something neither of their species had words for yet. But they both felt it. Suddenly, a soft chime came from Liari's wristpad. It was a message. From the human embassy. Corporal Jason Reed. You are formally requested to participate in a joint human-alien biological diplomacy program. You and your bonded partner are to serve as the first ambassadors of emotional synthesis. Jason stared at the message, then looked at Liari. We're gonna be famous, he said with a grin. She leaned on his shoulder, smiling. We already are. 1 month later. Across the galaxy, posters showed a human man and a lavender-skinned alien woman standing together, holding hands, not as captives or subjects, but as a symbol of the future. Love had broken barriers, touch had started revolutions, and one inflammation no one understood became the fire that warmed two worlds.